So, welcome everyone to today's session of what's new in 2020 Insight version 12.6. We have today two of our experts showing you some of the functionality and explaining these new functionalities within Insight. One is our product manager. His name is Nico. So he will guide you through the majority of these functionalities, what's new. And then we have also our senior director for the development side, Jeff. Probably lots of people know him already because all customers on the call. And yeah, he's the guy in charge of really developing all these new nice features within the system. My name is Joerg. Most of you, I know what I see here on the list. If not, I'm responsible for new accounts and existing accounts here in North America. And hopefully you have a good time seeing all these new features of 12.6. Again, there will be a recording so that you can watch it again. If you have not asked yet for this version, please send an email to our Insight support or to Heidi so that she can send you the download instruction of the new version. Also, we will have some time to answer some questions, but because of we are a lot of people on the call, we cannot unmute. That would be crazy. We did this once, and at this point in time, please use the chat window. Drop in your questions. You can also put all of your questions in while Nico and Jeff are presenting. And then at the end, we try to answer all of these questions for you. And if we don't have enough time, we would personally get back to you with an email to answer those. With that, let's go and hand it over to Nico.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jörg. So first of all, thank you to all who participate and take the time to learn more about our new developments. In the following hour, I would like to introduce you to some of the highlights of our new version 12.6. And in general, version 12.6 includes 33 new features and enhancements. And the highlights I want to show you are machine events, enhancements to our fairly new project task management module, new developments regarding the handling of pre-notification of shipment deliveries. And of course, we also continued our strategic browser-based client development, where Jeff will show you some of the new features as well at the end of this session. Good. So let's start right away with the so-called machine events. What does machine events mean? What is it all about? Modern CLC equipment can provide you with metrics and statistics that you can then use to optimize and automate your manufacturing process. And we can see lately that especially the machine vendors push this topic more and more. And with newer machines, you often have the ability to just buy the hardware and software that is then able to capture this data right away and make it available for ERP or MES solutions such as Insight. Some simple examples for these metrics would be, let's say, the total number of produced parts today or the reporting of downtimes. So you could evaluate the overall productivity and working hours of machines. But as well, you might be interested in things like the power consumption, or let's say if you have a painting line, you would like to get statistics about the temperature or humidity throughout the day, and then get an instant notification when, let's say, the temperature or humidity reaches a certain threshold. But even if you don't want to capture these kind of metrics, you can also use the machine events to simply get an automated feedback of produced item numbers so that you don't need to have an operator that scans parts manually. In order to be able to receive this machine data and process it, we have built the so-called machine events infrastructure in Insight. And the core function of this is an event queue where machine-specific data like mentioned metrics alarms or scan events can then be queued for further processing. This data can either be pushed or pulled into this event queue, for example, via a simple stored procedure, a web service call, or even a simple plain text file via a file monitor, for example, that, let's say, would read in a CSV or text or XML file. Before I will jump into the software to show this to you, one more thing worth mentioning and important to mention is that the machine data itself must be collected by specialized software that, for example, the machine vendor provides. So in other words, Insight is just the receiving system. Insight does not connect directly onto the machine controller. So a third-party software or system has to collect the data first and then needs to provide it to Insight. And then, yeah, Insight receives the information and then processes it according to your workflow or action tree setup. Also keep in mind, it's also possible to receive foreign document formats via mentioned monitors and then perform a conversion to the required Insight XML document format using custom actions or action trees. Good, so let's have a look how it looks in the software. I have opened the CNC machines form. This is our first step, and first, for every CNC machine you would like to receive and process this machine data from, you have to have a CNC machine set up here, like I have, for example, for this panel saw. Then we jump into the lookup tables because there is some basic data we need to provide and set up. First of all, that bit bigger. As the type of machine data can vary between machine brands and types, you can first define so-called event types you are interested in per machine. So in my case, I'm interested in scan, alert, and info events for this panel saw. And these are the three types we currently support. And a scan event, for example, would call an action to then process a container scan, or an alert event could call an action to inform the production manager when there is a downtime or a break of a machine. Another type of data is purely for information. This is the info event type here. This type of data will just be logged into specific tables and is meant for machine metrics such as throughput, temperature, etc. And you can later create your own analysis based on this data. Then next, we have the machine event properties, which we will assign here to each machine. And what we are doing here is when these attributes are found in the machine data XML that we receive from this third-party system, all of these attributes are parsed into individual log entry details that then can later on be used for reporting or other analysis. So in my example, I'm interested in all of these. So I set this up here. And then again, for the specific machine setup, I said, this is my panel saw here. I'm interested in alert and info events. And this is the criteria I want to read from the provided machine data. Quickly, we can have a look to how the raw data should look like for the machine event. So pull up this XML here. This is the format that Insight needs to receive, either directly by a third-party system, or, as I said, we can also receive a simple text file or basically any kind of format and then transform it or translate it into this format we need to pass on to the in-response action queue. So in this case here, you can see in the root node, I have the matching machine code, a timestamp when the machine created this information. And then we have a data node where all of these attributes are in. And here you can basically set up anything you want, whatever the machine can provide can be part of this data node here. And since we may be only interested in some of the values and not all that the machine can provide, that's the reason why you have to set this up here in Insight and also assign it for each machine to really, define what you're interested in. Then if we jump back into the CNC machines form, we have two new tabs. One is for actions and one is for events. So here in the events tab, you can search or filter for received machine events. And you can see here, I got some info events received. And when I select this on the right side, I can see all of the data that I received from this machine event. Now, you can also set up actions, as I said, and these actions or action trees can be defined for each event type. So for example, if I get a scan event, I want to basically just trigger the standard process container scan. The same stored procedures and same logic that is applied when an operator scans an item manually would happen here in this case. Or if I get an alert, I read in the machine data, and then, as I said, let's say depending on the temperature, if it goes above a certain threshold, we can then trigger a workflow or send an email or create a manual task for the production manager, for example. And for the info event, this is just a simple action that would just lock the data into the this form here and into some new tables we have set up. Good. So that's about the CNC machines and machine events. So a really powerful tool to not only get statistical information about your machines, but also to further automate the manufacturing process. Good. And then let's jump into the next topic, which is related to BOM setup, in particular to structure items. In general, structure items allow you to set up rules and set up conditions to build specific packages or kits of hardware or even manufacturing items within a bill of material. And all items belonging into the package will be reparented to the structure item BOM node. And these rules and conditions can now be set up in the item families form, meaning you can define conditions to filter for certain items, and these items in the BOM will then be reparented into the structure item. And this now allows us to set up more complex rules and logic than before, for example, to create mentioned packages for specific hardware. An example I always give is, let's imagine that hinges are included in the hardware package if this hinge is part of a BOM for a single door, but not if the hinge is part of a BOM for a complete pre-assembled cabinet. So all of these things can now be maintained in the item family form here with the new structure items tab. Next is my personal favorite because it only took some hours to develop, but for some users, I think it can really have a big impact on their daily use of the software and really make life easier. We have integrated a new filtering mode for the grid, which looks and feels like the filtering in Excel. The original request we got from a customer was that they want to be able to set an exclusive filter. Means they want to check those values that they want to filter out of the result set. And this wasn't really easy to do in the old filter mode or in the standard filter mode because you basically had to check mark all of the values first and then deselect the ones you don't want to see in the result set. And especially, as you can imagine, with many values, this was very tedious to accomplish. So this is now easier to do. And besides that, it features also some data type specific filter dialogues like we can see here for these date values. So instead of setting date ranges manually, you can now set the filter to, for example, only show you data from this week, as we can see here on the right side. So overall, a minor enhancement, yes, but I can really see that some users will love this new Excel-like filtering mode. It can be activated via the system configuration form and either globally for all users or for each user individually. Next, I'd like to highlight the so-called project task management module, which is fairly new and was first introduced in the beginning of last year in version 12.2. And in general, the project task management allows you to create project plans and maintain statuses and changes for any task throughout the whole project lifetime, which is then visualized in a Gantt chart view, as you can see on the screenshot here in this example. Now, you might ask yourself, how is this different to Microsoft Project or any other third-party project planning tool? As an integrated solution for project management within Insight, you can link various Insight entities to these tasks. For example, you could link a sales order or a purchase order to one of these tasks. And by doing so, it also allows you to auto-update your project plan and task statuses by using Insight's workflow system. So think of a scenario where when you confirm a sales order, the corresponding and linked task will then be automatically updated in its status or progress when, let's say, the sales order is confirmed and reaches a certain milestone in your sales order workflow. So contrary to standalone project management solutions, this integrated solution really allows you to have a live project plan, which can also be maintained with mentioned workflow logic to a certain extent. As I said, it was first introduced last year, and over the various release cycles we had in between, we always extended the feature set in each and every release. And the latest edition in 12.6 is a functionality that allows you to filter for certain tasks or a group of tasks, which is especially helpful and also needed when you deal with large project plans with hundreds of different tasks. Actually, we have some customers that maintain thousands of different tasks in this module. So if you haven't heard of it yet and you see a potential use case for your business, feel free to reach out to us and request a loan, a license, and then give it a test drive. The next topic is something that I personally experienced in a lot of projects that I was involved in. If you ship your products with your own trucks, you often have to send a pre-notification to customers when to expect the delivery. And it's not only about mentioning the date, but also about giving them information about the exact time frame when to expect the delivery. And especially when you have to ship your goods to large distribution warehouses, they often give you a certain time frame in advance. For example, when a certain shipping dock, is reserved for you, and when you can unload your goods from the truck then. All of this data can now be maintained with standard functionality in Insight. So for each shipping address, you can now set up if the customer needs a pre-notification. You can set up the delivery time frame in which way he wants to be notified as well, for example, via email or a phone call. And in addition to that, you can also add notes and instructions for the truck driver for each specific shipment stop. All data that is related to this new enhancements for delivery notifications can now be found in the addresses and in the shipments form. and especially in the shipments form, you can see all of the shipment stops and the required data, so that the users that have to send the pre-notification or give calls have all the data at hand in one screen. Good. So let's have a look how it looks in the software. First, we start in the addresses tab and have a look what data is required for this. So I've opened up this shipping address that I'm using here. And on the shipping tab, you can see a new group box here. Maximize this. So you can see a new group box. And first of all, for this specific shipping address, you can set this checkbox if a pre-notification is required, then what type of pre-notification this customer wants to get, an email or a phone call. And you can also define an offset value when to send this pre-notification. So in my case, I set it up to 10 days. This means 10 days in advance to the planned shipping date, I have to give this customer a call or send him an email. And then also we have a calendar for this specific shipping address, where just as before, of course, you can define what are the delivery days. But then also it's now possible to define delivery time frame. Means, for example, here I have a time window of from 10 to 11 a.m. where I need to unload the truck at this specific shipping address. Good, so that's what we have to set up in the shipping address. Now let's head over to the shipments form, to the shipment stop tab. And you can see here, I set up a test shipment where I have 3 shipment stops. And first of all, you can now see here, let's imagine I am the user now that has to give the calls or send the email. So first of all, I can go through this list and see whether a notification is required or not. And then also here at the end, we can see the specific delivery time start and end for this shipping address. And then when he calls the customer and notifies him in terms of the expected delivery date, they can first of all set up or enter the date when they have notified the customer and maybe what exact delivery date and time they have agreed on, like this, for example. And then there's also this new delivery notes edit field here, where you can then put in, for example, specific instructions for the truck driver to follow, like in my example I have here. Good. Maybe a quick reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to post them to the chat, and then at the end we will go through them and hopefully can give you answers on these. So that's about delivery notifications. Our next topic is about finance and accounting, where we now provide a new functionality to record incremental labor and overhead earned values to work in progress per work order operation. So how does it work? We have added logic to the existing checkpoint scan behavior so that labor and overhead cost data is calculated by Insight and stored in the container operation labor values that then in turn can be used to create the GL entries into the accounting system. So when an order item or a container is scanned, the system now logs the appropriate GL account numbers for debit and credit at the same time that the container operation is completed. The results are recorded in the work order scan log inquiry form, where then you can see the planned, earned, and actual labor records, and of course the corresponding GL account values. For the setup, you only need to assign the right GL classes per work center, and of course have a proper costing setup for the work center with all these formulas here, as you can see on the screenshot. Okay, finally, a few minor improvements, but no less important. First, another enhancement in regards to costing. We now calculate the cost for received outsourced operations, and the cost values are stored on the PDN item for that outsourced operation. And during cost rollup for actual and produced cost sets, the unit price from the corresponding purchase order line is then added as the order item material cost element for this PTN item. Next, we have also updated the PDF concat action type that allows you to merge individual PDF files into one. For example, if you like to merge the sales order confirmation with PDF files and technical drawings, let's say coming from 2020 design. And this action type now allows to merge PDF files with PDF versions higher than 1.5, for example, any PDFs that are generated by Reporting Service 2019 is generated with PDF version 1.7, I think. So it was important to update this action type. Also, you can now hide certain communication types from the customer communication tab. And to do so, you just have to open up the related lookup table. I think it's DBO communication types, and you will find a new flag called is active. And when you uncheck this, it will be hidden from this tab. And last but not least, we now support market exclusions for relationships between a customer and its contacts. Means you can now assign a contact person for every customer in every market. Before I hand over to Jeff to show us some of the new browser client enhancements, I would like to give you a short overview of our release schedule for this year. As always, in general, you can expect a new release at the end of each quarter. And as you can see here, version 12.7 coming end of June will be the next, but also the last release in the version 12 branch. And in fact, we are already working in the background on version 13. So currently we have 2 development branches, and that's also the reason why 12.7 will mostly be focused on stabilization and some minor enhancements, but all of the major changes and major new functionality or even modules will all be developed and released in version 13 coming end of September. Good, and with that, I hand over to Jeff to show us some of the new great enhancements in the browser-based client.
All right. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen now. It looks like it's sharing.
Yep.
So yeah, okay, so good. The first feature is what we call the context image gallery. And this is a way to define one or more attachments to be included in what we call this gallery. So I'm using the asset profiles form here in the web to show this. So I'm looking at my list of profiles, and if I drill into the details of any one profile, you see here in the upper toolbar where we've got our record navigator and our tab control, we've got this image here, this thumbnail image that can give you a visual representation of the item you're currently maintaining or working on or reviewing. So this, as you navigate the record set, will of course change the images and show you the ones that you've defined as the thumbnail for that particular data entity. So the way you do this is any entity that has attachment support. Sorry, Nico, what was that? saw a chat pop up on my screen, Nico.
Oh, I just answered a question in the chat.
Okay, okay.
Never mind.
Right. Okay, so basically, yeah, you define which attachments for this entity are part of this gallery, and the one with the lowest sequence number. So if I look at my attachments for this particular forklift, you see I've got 4 different attachments, and you see here that they've got a gallery sequence definition: 1, 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first one will be the one that's in the thumbnail, but I can always click on the thumbnail and get a more expanded version of the gallery, and then it will allow me to navigate through all of the ones I've decided to be in that image gallery. So this feature will be available for all of the database entities in Insight that currently support attachments, and more that we add attachment support for in the future. So you can imagine that other entities like where this could be beneficial is like in the items, products, contacts, features, options, etc., where you want to give your maintenance users a visual context of what they're working on and reinforce that. So in addition to that, what I also wanted to show you is that besides regular kind of image formats, there's a few other formats that we support in the gallery now. So if I go beyond these first 3 pictures of this nice forklift, you can see you can now actually embed PDF documents in the gallery too. So if you attach, an informational PDF, you can completely navigate that PDF within this viewer without actually downloading this file to your local machine from the server. So that's one example. A couple other examples that I want to point out, I think I have them here, is a new GLB format, which is a new 3D model format optimized for web. And coincidentally, the Construct environment is now able to produce these GLB formats instead of, or in addition to, the VRML files that you're used to in previous versions of Construct. So these are actually, interactive 3D models that you can, spin around and inspect. And of course, you can open it up in a bigger window and do the same thing there. So that's interesting. We'll support this more and more on the web. So this can be used on shop floor screens to give your users 3D models on the fly on the shop floor if needed. Another type of format that's supported is SVG image files. So another scalable vector graphic format optimized for browsers. And the interesting thing about SVGs is that they can contain additional metadata that lets the image be manipulated at runtime. So what it is there's extra CSS tags in these SVG files that allow you to, depending on your CSS variables, turn off and on certain things, change colors of things, even animate things. So it's a much more interactive image format, very clean and scalable, and even actually can, if you see the hover here, you can even like tag holes and dimensions and other things with actual additional detail that if the user hovers on them, they can see that information coming up. So we already have a conversion from our construct geometry files to create these SVG files on the fly as part of the GenPost processing. So you can now start to create these SVG files and use them for various purposes, particularly in your shop floor screens where you want users to be able to inspect the engineering details. It's including all the things that are in the geometry file, like edge numbers, dimensions, geometries, even tool paths, if they're in the geometry file, are supported here. Edge information, if the parts have edge banding, they're all listed on here. And again, full control. You can draw attention to certain types of machining with colors, with making them bolder, with hiding other ones. So a lot of cool flexibility that you can exercise with this capability. The next thing I want to point out, and I'll jump to the assets form, is what we call our new status log component. So if you're familiar with the desktop product, you know that wherever there's a status tab, you get basically a history of all the status changes that have happened to that particular piece of data. So that was a pretty, basic looking tree view that had a mixture of the status changes and the actions that were run. So helpful for troubleshooting what's gone on and in response between all the status changes. So what we've done is we've turned this into a more visual component in the form of a timeline. So oldest at the bottom, newest on the top, and you can see the progression of statuses up through the timeline to the most recent one. And we've also included a few extra pieces of data that were not in the previous one, like for example, when one of those status changes has hit any one of the milestones defined in the workflow. So here I know I've gone from initial to firmed, and then because the asset was failed, it maybe went down, it had a malfunction, and then it went into maintenance mode, and then it came back up into service, and therefore it was firmed and ready to be used again. You also see the duration of time that the entity has spent in each status, right here in each of the screens, and also a visual representation of the avatar of the user or the in-response user, if it was an automatic status change, who actually made the status change in the system. If actions were run between these status changes, you see a little lightning indicator here, lightning bolt, and you can click on that, and then in the right-hand section, you would see the action or action tree that was run as a result of moving this entity to that status. So that's just a little more of a graphical view, a little more visually appealing, and maybe easier to follow than the very kind of data overloaded tree view we used to have in the desktop application. Next topic is search criteria. So search criteria, we made some significant enhancements compared to 12.5 and earlier versions of the web client. We've made it far more compatible and even stronger in some ways than the desktop solution. So you can create simple or complex searches using any combination of comparison operators and field values. So the system comes delivered with what we call a default set. And that default set basically includes a list of the most common criteria that we feel people would use to find data within that form. But it's not limited to that list like it is in the desktop. Here you can continue to add additional criteria, and you have access to all of the columns that are in the resulting data grid below. So you can really take advantage of all the fields for searching, not just the ones that we decided at development time to put into the UI form. In addition to that, there's a lot more capability in the operators for the different types of data fields. So if it's a text field, you have a lot more choices here. In the desktop client, basically everything was like an equals or a like by default, but here you have the ability to choose all sorts of other operators like contains, does not contain, starts with, ends with, the more typical equals, but you have does not equal, blanks, non-blanks, true SQL likes where you can use actual SQL wildcard characters in the searches, and perhaps one of the more powerful things is you can use lists as well. So you can specify multiple values you're looking for without entering a complex and or nested structure within your criteria set. So just an example, I'll pull up one of my saved searches here where I'm saying where status is any of new and in service. So either new or in service and plant is equal to plant 1. So if I do that find now, on that search, now I've got a much smaller list, and I'm only showing in-service items that are linked to plant 1 for these assets. So this list here is a list of all of the named searches that users can create. I mentioned we deliver the default one, but any number of additional searches can be managed and maintained by users. These search named sets can also be saved as global so that they can be used by all users in the system, or they can be personalized to each user individually. One more other neat feature here is when you manage these sets, let's say it's this one, I can actually turn this one, if I edit it, into a new kind of search called an automatic search. So if I turn that on, and then I, let's say, refresh my assets form, what's going to happen is as soon as I come into this form, it's going to choose that criteria set and automatically perform the search. So I don't have to, select the criteria set and then manually press the search button. It's just going to jump me into the data that I'm looking for. So if my job every day is to work with data that meets this criteria, then as soon as you open up the form, your data is going to be already pre-selected and ready for you to go. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, there is an advanced mode as well. If I click this button, it toggles into the advanced mode where I can actually add groups. So then I can, build nested criteria and really go, far more complex than with what the simple criteria brings to the table. But our feeling is that most people will be able to use the simple sets simply because the simple sets now allow you to mix ands and ors by support for multiple values. So I can go in here and add multiple values, which really means it's anding these two conditions, but within this condition, this is an or. So again, a lot more flexibility, a lot more power, and you can always, if you want to, expand this region with our region manipulation capabilities. So if you have one that always has 5 criteria that you actively work with, you can expand this and save this configuration. So every time I come into this form, I'm consuming more space for my criteria. But if you don't need that space, you can either collapse it back to the 2 rows, or even if you're doing automatic searches, you can collapse that whole region and use your entire available area for manipulation and browsing through your data. All right, so that's on the search criteria component. The next thing is basically CSS overrides and themes. So we've now delivered with the system a different theme. So if I go to my user menu up here in the upper right-hand corner, I can change my theme from light mode into dark mode. So we now have 2 themes available. That are styled appropriately for the different light versus dark mode. So for example, it's working in every place consistently. Switching is fairly easy to go back and forth. But more importantly, the themes we've developed an architecture around customization that allows you to not only modify but create your own themes. So if you want to sort of brand the system more to your corporate colors, corporate themes, you can do that without affecting the core system code. We're treating everything as overrides, so you basically create override files that supersede our CSS styles and themes. And that just goes beyond the light and dark theme. You can actually, if you wanted to, you can change font styles, font colors, the way the controls look and feel. Not that we're recommending everyone do that, but it is possible if the need arises that you can do that type of customization without worrying that you're overriding our core files. There's always the ability to turn off your customization project and go back to the standard Insight delivered published version. And that's true both not just for visual changes, but also for functional changes. We continue to work on our customization capabilities where they're done as overrides to the core system and not as changing our core source files. So yeah, so that's it for the main visual things, at least to the browser solution. Of course, we're working on new modules all the time in the browser solution, and we'll be addressing those upcoming modules and what the roadmap looks like for that in upcoming sessions like this. So Nico, I'll hand it back to you.
Yep.
At this point.
Okay, I think that brings us to the Q&A session now. Trish and Joerg, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, not sure if you can see this on your end. There was one, do SSRS report actions work yet in the web shop floor user?
Okay.
By work, you mean would they display on the local browser? Would that be the question?
I guess that's the question, yeah.
Yeah, no, not at this time.
Okay.
I have another one here.
Yeah.
Is there a way to tie project task management to sales order statuses and track the progress of the order? What I mean is when the order's been cut, assembled, and shipped partially.
And that the project task gets updated in its progress based on this?
Yes, I guess so. Yes, a way to tie them.
That's how we intended to work with the embedded project task management. So as I tried to point it out in my presentation, that's really where the benefit is when you have an integrated project management inside rather than using a third-party tool like Microsoft Project, so that you can actually link tasks to different sales orders, purchase orders, etc. And then depending on your workflow setup, it could also mean, as you mentioned, that the project task progress is automatically updated when the sales order confirmation is sent to the customer, for example. Yeah, that's possible.
Okay, I have another one here. Will other forms be getting web versions in the future? Example, sales orders, product versions, items, etc. Or is this already available?
Yes, all of the forms. We don't. When we try to develop or bring existing desktop forms to the browser-based client, we're not just trying to copy them that one-to-one from what we had on the desktop. But instead, as you've seen in Jeff's presentation, we try to make the UI easier to use and also visually more appealing, like, for example, with a new status log component. And yes, at the end, our ultimate goal is to have all of the functionality and all of the forms we have currently on the desktop available in the browser-based client. And the next big new module we will transition is the sales order management, actually. And currently, our roadmap looks like that we are now, as I said, we are already working in the background on version 13. We will build some infrastructure components like the product configurator itself, pricing engine, sales order validation, etc., so that these components can work via web service calls. And we plan to release the first pilot of browser-based sales order management at the end of the year with version 13.1.
Okay, I guess you got a kind of thumbs up on this one. This sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and just to have a little more color to that one too, that the configurator portion of the sales order module is being carefully developed kind of as a standalone component that could possibly be used outside of the context of a native Insight environment. So I know some of you guys have worked on developing your own web portals where you allow your users to enter orders, but maybe struggle a little bit with implementing the configurator logic that's in Insight on your own. So that's something that we're looking at doing is making the configurator an autonomous component that can be used in different contexts and different scenarios.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have one here. Joerg,
okay.
I'm not sure if you saw this one. Is it possible to save the predefined search criteria and share it among all users?
Yes. Yes, that's when you mark a search criteria set as global, then that means all users have access to that search criteria. So not everyone has to build their own one. If there's a common one that should be used across the organization, someone with the right permissions. You need a special permission to do the global ones, but that person can make a global one, and then it would be usable by all users in the system that have access to that form.
Okay, thank you. I have another one here. What does form customization look like in the web version compared to the XML used now?
Right, so it's a little, at the moment, it's a little more technical. It requires development skills in React and TypeScript, but it's more open-ended. It's more flexible and powerful at the moment. So you basically can either override properties that come from our core code, or you can basically invent new forms from scratch using our infrastructure. But there is not a sort of a defined schema yet at this point, and a very sort of controlled mechanism by which to do that. So it's a little bit of the Wild West, to use that analogy, but there's a lot of power available. So the skill sets required going forward will be typical web development skills to be able to do those customizations. But I want to emphasize again that the customizations are kept in a separate project, and they're merged, they're blended with our core solution at runtime, similar to how we did that XML, so that your customizations are kept off to the side, and you don't have to worry about affecting core functionality, and which is going to, of course, make upgrade processing much easier as you move from version to version.
Okay. We got a comment here, which I really appreciate, not just a question, but somebody wanted to say, you guys are doing great work on the web forms, and I look forward to being able to start taking advantage of these new forms. So really, thank you very much for that comment here.
Thank you. Good to hear and to get some feedback. You know, we are working hard in the background, spend a lot of time and thoughts on pushing this browser-based client, and yeah, give it a test drive and really give us your feedback. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is we're working really hard at maintaining cross compatibility between the browser solution and the desktop solution. So you don't have to choose this moment in time where you completely, abandon the desktop solution and jump to the browser solution. You can operate in a mixed mode, module by module, as you see fit. Even have a couple of beta users in your environment using the web solution, while the rest of your core users still use the desktop. So we're working hard on maintaining that parallel strategy as we move forward.
But I see two questions here. Will the web-based portions be hosted locally?
Yes, currently it's hosted locally on premise, but in the future, in the next years, we will also, of course, analyze and evaluate how to host inside in the cloud. This is really the underlying initiative why we are doing this conversion now to the browser-based client, because that's like the first step you have to do to have a browser-based client, and after that, it's about hosting the database on Azure or wherever. But yes, currently browser-based client is the first step, but eventually we will analyze how to bring it to the cloud as well.
It's more about saying that we have a dedicated environment per customer at the moment, which doesn't preclude you from hosting it outside of your premise, right? So if you want to host it on AWS or Azure or some other third-party data hosting service, you're more than welcome to do that. But it's not a true cloud-based solution in the sense that it's continuously updated by us, from time to time, and sharing that application pool amongst multiple customers. So in the meantime, each customer owns their own environment exclusively, whether it's hosted on your own facility or by one of these hosting providers.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, another comment here. Thanks. Yes, the web version looks really good. Thank you for that comment. And another question. will there be a mobile version available when users access the web version on a mobile device?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part again, Joerg?
Will there be a mobile version available when users access the web version on a mobile device?
Yeah, I mean, by default, that's already the case. I mean, if your mobile device runs any modern browser, you can already use the full browser solution on tablets, on phones. So it's not to mean that every form is going to work well on a phone. There are some forms that we optimized for larger screens where there's a lot of data being manipulated, but we definitely are targeting certain forms, particularly in the area of shop floor control, where we design a responsive web app that knows how to adapt to smaller devices and give the user an optimal experience when he's working on a mobile device.
Okay, thanks. And one question here, will we be able to easily see the procedures that build the web form? I know if we add more columns to the SQL procedure, those columns become available on the web forms.
Yes, the question is yes, right, in both cases. And the procedures that build the web forms, yes, there is a set of tables in the Insight desktop solution right now, in the lookup tables that allow you to view. I think Nico is going to show you live. So there's what we call data collection objects, which are basically the source of all web service requests for the web. And so you see the name of the data collection and the underlying procedures that are responsible for retrieving data, deleting data, merging data, and some other metadata information here that's used to drive all of this information. So yes, you have access to see the connection points between the front end and the final procedures that are driving the data for those services, and obviously then have the ability to override those procedures and add columns like you suggested.
Awesome, thanks. From my side, I cannot see any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Anything on your end, Trish?
I'm just double checking.
Just want to make sure that we don't miss anything here. But again, guys, if you have any other questions, don't be shy. Send us an email or send it to Insight Support that reach everyone, and we would be more than happy to answer it. While Trish is checking, one thing here I want to point out. The IWF show in August, what we have done here is we have created a full day symposium there, which we are sponsoring, and we have guest speakers invited. And it's a full day workshop all about how processes can be automated. Everything in sales area of manufacturers, on the purchasing side, in production and financing, and so on. And these guest speakers, they come up with, or they bring to the table real life examples. Some of them you probably know. They're known in the industry, and that will be an awesome day. Starts at 9 o'clock in the morning local time until 4 p.m. There's lunch. There's a networking session included as well. So would be great if you guys make it to the IWF show. And then August 22nd, there will be the symposium. So please sign up for that. If you have any questions on how to sign up and so on, again, send us an email. We would send you the details on how to do that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is for the IWF, we also will do a customer event. So another session over there. We have not defined the final date and time, but very shortly we will distribute that information to you guys, so that we have Jeff on site, we have Nico on site, and others here from 2020, like Ryan, and some of the project managers, so that with you as customers, we can host this one event again. Everything what's new at that point in time, hear your ideas, where the solution should go, and so on, like a customer event, which we did a couple of years ago before COVID. So we will send out details on that customer event, IWF, very shortly. Alrighty, with that, I don't see any other questions. Nothing from your side, Trish?
No, that's everything. We're done.
Okay, well, perfect in time. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time today, logging in, and I wish you a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.